the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, September 17th. Everybody's having a fantastic week. All right, we continue. There continue to be lots of stories about, Charlie Kirk and his killer, potential motives, although very little new information, actual information, has come out. It does seem, as I've been saying all along, that probably the most, the simplest explanation is probably the truest explanation. And that is, this is somebody who's on the left, who despises, despised Kirk, despised what he was saying, had some connection to the trans world, and shot him. More, I still think, unless I'm proven otherwise, more for attention than anything else. But we will see. We'll get more information. In the meantime, there's a lot of talk about political violence in the United States. There's a lot of talk about violence increasing, a lot of connecting. You see a lot of connecting of the Ukrainian girls' brutal murder in North Carolina, and the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And a general sense, and I think a general sense that exists out there among many people, that this country is descending into some violent hellhole, and the political violence is out of control. The nihilistic left is committing acts of political violence on a regular basis. That's the impression one gets, particularly if one listens, reads right-wing media. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it. What I think is actually going on. How bad is it? And what should we really be afraid of, and who should we really be afraid of? I'll go back to the brutal killing of that Ukrainian girl, which is just horrific and pointless. But so what do you make of that? Is that now, is this what's going on in America? Is this some sign of a new thing that's happening in America? And I think the reality is no. The reality is we paid attention to that story because of the video, because of its brutality, because we saw it. We could see it with our own eyes. There are over 60 murders committed every day in the United States. Over 60. Something like 62 point something. Murders committed every day in the United States. I don't know how many of them are like that. Do you? I mean, maybe every day there's a murder like that. Some crazy homeless person slaughtering some innocent person somewhere in this huge country of 350 million people. Is this unique? Is this different? The main difference is those are not videotaped, and this was. So the fact that we got to see it, the fact that we got to see the horror, doesn't change the real nature of it, which is horrific. But it does seem to change the response everybody has to it, and the extrapolation from one case to there's some kind of national disaster, there's some kind of epidemic of horrific violence going through this country. And people really have the sense. I know you guys, some of you guys have it, and you guys fight with me constantly about crime numbers, constantly. Because you're convinced by the sense that you have, and by the reporting, by the media, by the partisans who have an incentive to do this, that the United States murder is spiking and going through the roof in the United States, and it's horrific. And that's just not true. The numbers just don't match it. And again, I've said you can fake violent crime numbers, you can fake break-ins and burglaries. You can fake even the numbers on rape. Very difficult to fake murder rates. Very, very difficult to fake murder rates. And murder rates are declining. Almost everywhere. Almost everywhere. And from a historical perspective, from the perspective of the US and history, they're declining to some of the lowest rates they've ever been at. So, yeah, I mean, the impression one gets from videos, from commentary, from reading the news, from listening to the media, is that murder is through the roof. It's brutal out there. New York, you can't walk in the street at night in New York. Just not true. As somebody who's walked at night in the streets of New York recently, it's just not true. And again, you know, I like numbers, and the numbers just don't back up this idea that there's some kind of crazy crime wave, particularly murder wave, going on in the United States. And I know that goes against what you feel. That goes against what you're being told. That goes against what, you know, the tribes out there want you to believe. But it's the reality. We live in a pretty safe world. Pretty safe out there. And this brings me to political violence. Political violence is, you know, you can categorize it in a variety of different ways, and different people who try to measure it categorize it differently. But no matter how you categorize it, political violence is relatively low. It's rare. And it's way below the heights of the 1960s. And, you know, the only, if you look at the number of people killed in political violence over the last 30 years, it's high only because of September 11th. If you take out September 11th, if you count that as political violence, then there's very little, very few people have been killed from political violence over the last 30 years, and that's not increasing. It's not getting much, much worse. Again, in spite of what commentators, a president, and the rest of the world are telling you, just like there's no carnage in the streets of America, there's no massive increase in political violence in America. Now, there's no question, America is a more violent place than almost anywhere else, well, than anywhere else in the industrialized world, right? Ian's putting up stats up there, and he says that we're more, murder rates in the U.S. are 2x Canada's, and you know, 6x is Germany's, and, you know, I don't know, 20x Japan or something like that, and South Korea, which are incredibly, there's no murder. There's almost never murder in Japan and South Korea. So our rates are high, but they've always been high. We are, like it or not, America has been a violent society. Maybe going all the way back to the frontier, we have been a violent society. And we still are. But we're not getting worse. And it's surprising we're not getting worse. For example, if you look at left-wing, political violence, it's bad. It's a lot smaller by almost any measure that you measure it than right-wing political violence. But almost any measure over the last 30 years, you know, there's been more violence from the right than from the left. Now, if you add the left up with Islamists, there's a connection. But if you add the two up, it gets a little closer. But it's not increasing, and that surprises. Because the reality is that you'd expect it to increase. And you know, given what kids are being taught in school today, given what professors are drilling into their heads, you would think there would be a lot more violence, a lot more rioting, a lot more killing, a lot more, I don't know, just violent action. Given that the professors have given them a thumbs up, given them a sanction, said it's okay, not only okay, it's required, it's necessary. Now, the professors never go out there. So it's surprising how little violence there is, relatively speaking, given how bad our educational system is. I mean, all these numbers of deaths and killings and everything include things like school shootings and everything else. Again, homicides are down and relatively low in American history. Surprising, given how awful our education is. In particular, what they teach at our universities. If speech is violence, you'd expect there'll be a lot more violence against speakers. Now, what all of these studies don't take into account, and this is their big weakness, is they look at murders, and because murders are easy to measure, easy to count. It's objective whether somebody's dead or not. And in that realm, yeah, the numbers are not that alarming, and they have not increased. But what about other forms of violence? What about silencing speakers, not letting you speak by banging drums in the background and by yelling at him, by singing, by whatever, right? Whatever means. What about, other forms of, violence like what Antifa does? Antifa rarely kills somebody, but it disrupts events, it beats people up. Who's measuring that? Is that being measured? Can that be measured? How does one measure it? What counts and what doesn't count? It could very well be that by those measures, the violence, particularly on the left, is significantly higher. It is significantly higher. But again, those are things that are hard to measure. Again, by the measure of body count, the right is much more destructive than the left. Just three events that each one of them were based on a kind of, you could call it a right-wing manifesto, killed more people than almost, I think, any other leftist kind of event, or for that matter, Islamist event, with the exception of 9/11. Tree of Life, killing in the synagogue, the El Paso Walmart attack, and the Buffalo supermarket shooting, those three, are huge in terms of number and their lethality. And they're all kind of far right as defined today, right? So I would caution you not to get too riled up about the current levels of violence. Now, it could be that it's going to get much worse. It's possible. Something would have to trigger it. I'm not sure what. But it could be that it's going to get much worse. Again, the educational system. And the thing that scares me the most of everything that's happened, I mean, Charlie's shooting was horrific and scary and just disturbing and horrible and tragic and everything, right? But what really disturbed me even more than that, because you could assign that to some crazy individual who did this, but what was disturbing was the reaction. How many young people said, yeah, it was okay. Now, does that mean we're heading towards more violence? I don't know. I mean, what I think is happening is while young people, influenced by their professors, and you can include all the pro-Palestinian demonstrations on campuses, while they are all violence is, violence is okay. Speech is violence. We should silence these guys. It's okay for us to occupy buildings. It's okay for us to beat up Jewish kids. It's okay. All of these things are okay, they say. The people who are actually willing to actually act, their number is very small. It's easy to pitch a tent and live in a tent for a while. It's kind of cool. Hang out with your buddies and pretend to be, to virtue signal to the world how much you're sacrificing for the poor Palestinians. But how many of those people are willing to actually fly to Gaza and fight on the side of Hamas? I think zero. How many of them are willing to occupy a campus building? Not a particularly risky thing. A few dozen maybe, out of the hundreds that pitch tents. Very few are willing to actually engage in the violent activity. And how many of them are willing to actually shoot, kill the people whose speech they consider violence? Very, very, very few. Luckily for all of us. That is, somehow civilization has a hold on these people that's strong enough to overcome the beliefs that they might only be accepting in a shallow way from their professors. I mean, it is fascinating to when you see people being questioned in the street about, I don't know, their support for the Palestinians, and they're asked which river and which sea. They have no clue. They don't know where Palestine is. They don't know anything about the history. They don't understand anything. A lot of this is just kind of the cool thing to do. How many of them are willing to go man the barricades for this cause? Very few. And good. I mean, I'm really happy. Because if everybody who went through a intersectionality, post-colonial, crazy left, anti-civilizational class actually was radicalized to the point of action, then we would be in really, really grave danger as a civilization. There would be riots in the streets. There would be a revolution amongst us because so many people go through those classes. And yet most of them then get jobs, maybe marry, have a family, and soon enough those ideas are forgotten. They're too busy trying to figure out the latest tax loophole so that they pay less taxes, and trying to get their kids into the coolest, best daycare that only people, only they can afford. Luckily for us, the radicalization goes only so deep. And this is true just broadly, much broader than this. I'll give you another example, which has always been striking to me. There are close to 2 billion Muslims in the world. By some estimates, there's somewhere between 500 to 800 million Muslims who express support for the Islamist jihadist cause. 500 to 800 million who express support for ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Hamas and Hezbollah and generally the jihadi cause. Of those 500 million to 800 million, how many of them are willing to strap a bomb, walk into a supermarket and blow themselves up, or walk into a coffee shop and blow themselves up, and go and get those 73 virgins? How many of them are willing to do that? How many of them are excited to do it? How many of them are interested in getting involved in organizing such things or managing such stuff? Luckily, very, 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 very few. We know this. How? Because there are not that many suicide bombers. I mean, there are periods in which there are more, there are periods in which there are less, but generally, there are not that many. Nothing is compared to the 500 to 800 million people who claim to adhere to these ideas and support the suicide bomber when he goes. But they're not willing to do it themselves. So, our society, even some of the weaker parts of our society, basically, I think, helped make violence unacceptable. And people are not quite willing to go out there and kill and be killed for the cause that it's easy for them to claim as their own, to claim that they're willing to fight for. Well, when the fight actually happens, almost nobody is there to actually get involved in the fight. Oh, I miscounted the virgins. I apologize. It's 72. I promoted, I made it even more attractive. I mean, God, if there were 73 virgins, you'd have a lot more suicide bombers. Right? These Muslims are cheap and they only do 72. So, anyway, I was watching Nick Fuentes today. And what is it about Nick Fuentes that gets people? I mean, he's got millions of followers and people excited about him. And yeah, they're all racists and anti-Semites, but how did he get those people? Because a lot of people weren't when they first watched him. What is his message that is so attractive? And what's the message that of most successful people in this business, in the business I'm in? And I was thinking, God, I'm doing this all wrong. See, if I want a lot of followers, if we want to really increase subscribers, then I should have given you a whole rant today on how we're at the precipice of the end of Western civilization. We're at each other's throats. People are killing each other left and right. I mean, there's carnage in the streets, and look, and the left and right and everybody, and there's a civil war about to break any day now, and life generally sucks. You guys should feel bad about the world because you can't get jobs. If you're a guy, you're not getting any women because of feminism or whatever. If you're a woman, you can't find a decent guy because they're all feminized. I can keep going. I can do this shtick. I can't do it with conviction, but I can do it. Things are just horrible. That sells. Catastrophizing, end of the world, millennium cults, things are horrible, things are bad, things are falling apart. That sells. And of course, I know why it's happening. I'm the only one who knows why it's happening because I'm the only one out there. I'm not the only one who knows what's happening. I'm the only one who has the courage and the honesty to tell you who really is doing this all to you. They're all lying to you. They're all making stuff up. But I am authentic. I'm going to tell you exactly who's behind this plot to destroy the world. And we all know who it is. I don't even have to say it because just by implying it, we all know who it is. See, I can do it. And, my viewership would go through the roof. Go through the roof. Lucinda, are you trying to lighten the mood? She's asking if waffles or pancakes, which is better. I had these amazing pancakes. Where did I have these amazing pancakes? I can't remember now. Anyway, I think Jennifer's right in asking if blueberries are involved. So here's the point. This is not a show where you're going to get catastrophism. I look at the data. I'm not going to get panicky. I want to know what's actually going on. Is there a left-wing network of terrorists trying to kill leading conservative spokesmen? I mean, maybe, but I don't see any evidence of it. And certainly, the murder of Charlie Kirk does not seem related to that. There might be a bunch of kids in their 20s maybe, but nihilistic kids fooling around on the internet and talking about that. But is there an Al-Qaeda of the left, the ISIS of the left, just scheming and building and creating platforms from which they will then descend on the world and kill their political opponents. I don't think so. I don't see any evidence that there is such. There is a massive number of just evil academics destroying kids' minds, teaching them complete and utter nonsense, and encouraging whatever sense of nihilism they already have. But it doesn't really seem to stick. Even Gen Z is going into the workplace. As I told you before, they're making more money than previous generations. Everybody complains about them in the workplace, but they must be doing okay because they're making good money. A number of them have become entrepreneurs and done very, very, very well. And the rest are becoming corporate, getting corporate jobs and becoming part of the machine and working for the man. These are terms from the 60s, I think, and doing their thing. I am interested. I see people saying that Destiny said some controversial things. I'm curious what he said. I don't know if you can write it on YouTube, but I'm curious what Destiny said. And in terms, I assume, in terms of the Charlie Kirk thing. So I think, by the way, I think it's much more likely there are organizations on the right, scheming the overthrow of the U.S. government or planning or doing things like that than they're on the left. Again, the left seems to me fragmented, disorganized, incompetent, stupid. Well, not stupid, but just incompetent. Incompetent. And very much in their own heads. And very much not oriented to action. Whereas January 6th was coordinated. Was planned. It was incompetent. I mean, the good thing is, generally, these people on the left and right are completely incompetent. And if you're going to fear anybody, and this is I think important, if you're going to fear anybody, then what you should fear is not radicals on the left and radicals on the right. What you really should fear, of course this is a consequence of radicals on the left and radicals on the right, but you really should fear is our government. I think our government is the source of real authoritarianism down the road. It's already a source of fear if you've got brown skin, if you look Latin in certain cities in America. Our government is a source of fear. We'll see, but based on what Pam Bondi said yesterday, a source of fear for anyone like me criticizing the right, our government is what is going to trample on our rights, already does, already has, and seems to be committed, left and right, united in one way or another, to continue to trample on our rights. So I think if we're going to fear something, we should watch the left and the right, because they're going to do a lot of damage, and they drive what happens in politics. But in terms of actual threat to your life, to your liberty, it's the federal government. It's the federal government that is likely the biggest threat to you. All right. Ooh, that's not good. Huh. All right, I did that again. I keep doing this. All right, I've missed some, I need a couple, let me just see. Michael and Michael. Maybe it's only one. All right. All right, let me just do this. All right, so let's political violence. I mean, we'll talk more about this, and more data I'm sure will come out, and we'll see where how all this plays out ultimately. But again, no reason to panic yet. Panic about the universities, panic about the kids' education that they're getting, panic about the future of the country, because I think at the end of the day, what do cowards who want to inflict violence do at the end of the day? They vote in authoritarians who will inflict the violence for them. They don't have the guts to pull the trigger, but they can hire people to pull the trigger for them. Call it government. They can ask the government to go after their enemies for them. They don't have to do it themselves. And that's what ultimately happens. As we make people mindless, we increase the odds that our government become more and more violent towards us, that our government violates our rights more and more, the more tribal we become. That's the real threat. It's who we vote into power, much more than, I don't know, some conspiracy to shoot right-wing commentators on campuses. All right, talk about our federal government. The Federal Reserve met today to decide on, they do this once a month or so. A bunch of people sit around a table and centrally plan and determine the most important price in the U.S. economy, in the world economy. The price of money, the price of time, the price of money over time. That is the interest rate. It is stunning and shocking. And I keep reminding you every time the Fed meets that this is stunning and shocking. That we completely understand the price controls over many, many, many goods. Yeah, they just don't make sense. It doesn't work. Always fail. We still haven't got that quite on rent control, it turns out, given Mamdani in New York is going to win. But we seem to figure out that we don't want the federal government determining the price of bread or the price of iPhones or other prices. The price of money. That is okay for the government to determine. So the Fed met today. And unsurprising to me or to markets, the Fed lowered interest rates by 0.25%. Now, basically what the Fed does is it lowers something called the benchmark overnight lending rate. This is the rate that banks lend banks lend to each other. But banks don't lend to each other anymore because everything goes through the reserves on the Fed. The real interest rates that the Federal Reserve controls is the interest that it pays on the money banks hold in reserve at the Fed. And that has declined by 0.25 point. And the idea is if you reduce interest rates, more people will borrow money. Banks which are getting a lower return on the money that they have in reserve will have a greater incentive to lend it out. Lending would go up. As lending goes up, business activity goes up, jobs are created, all is good in the world. So interest rates have supposedly gone down. Now, of course, the risk with that is you're also increasing the volatility, the velocity of money. You're introducing, in a sense, more money into the economy. There's money tucked away in reserves, and now it's starting to be active in the economy because they're being lent out by banks. And when banks lend it out, they're creating money that is much more, has a much higher velocity than money that has no velocity just sitting at the Fed. And by doing that, you could increase inflation, price inflation. That's the argument. I told you about this yesterday. I said there would be 3 positions. One not to lower, the second lower 0.25%, and the third to lower 50 basis points. And I said that the majority would be to lower 0.25. I was right about that. I was wrong about everything else. There weren't 3 positions, there were only 2. Nobody on the Fed voted to keep interest rates steady. Indeed, 11 of the 12 members of the Fed, so it wasn't even close, 11 of the 12 members of the Fed voted to reduce interest rates by 0.25%. The one person who dissented, the one person who dissented was, of course, Fabian Mirand, who was approved to sit on the board at the Fed yesterday by the Senate so that he could dissent today at the meeting. That was the only purpose. He was there to represent the Trump administration's position about interest rates. He advocated for a full half percentage point decrease in interest rates. And he actually articulated what he believed the Fed should do in the months to come. And he basically believes the Fed should decrease interest rates by 1.5% before the end of 2025, which is a position consistent with Donald Trump. Donald Trump says 3% by the end of 2025, but no economist could actually say that without breaking out into absurd laughter. So I think Mirand has to moderate it to 1.5%. 6 rate cuts between now and the end of this year. So that's 2 cuts a month. Ain't happening, Mirand. But that is what he would like to see. The rest of the Federal Reserve Board disagrees. As I've told you before, I don't really. Did Lisa Cook vote? Yes, she did. She voted. She was prevented from being fired by an appellate court yesterday, so she could participate in the meeting until this goes through the courts and determines whether Donald Trump can fire her or not. So she voted to lower by 0.25%, as everybody else did. This is the point. I don't know what the right rate is. I don't know if there is a right rate. The Fed shouldn't be determining interest rates. I mean, you could argue if the Fed exists, then it has to determine monetary policy. It's not clear that interest rates is the way to regulate, if you will, monetary policy. There are other ways to do it that have to do with the amount of money being supplied into the economy. But that's tricky, and it's much harder for people to grasp. There's no one number you can look at. We're targeting this. If you follow some kind of rule, it's very difficult for the rest of the world to follow it. And again, it's not clear rule is right. The market is the only way to get these things right. The only objectivity that can be brought to interest rates is through a market process. And of course, a market process, and the supply of money, by the way, is a market process, and that can only happen in a world without a central bank and private free banks. And that's a world I do not expect to see in my lifetime. Maybe in your lifetime. Maybe. We can hope, right? That in your lifetime you'll be able to see that. Anyway, you'll see a lot of talk about this. Donald Trump will not be happy. He wanted a much bigger cut. But I think Trump is probably going to wait it out until May to get rid of, next year to get rid of Powell. He's not going to get enough people onto the Federal Open Market Committee. Even if he can get rid of Lisa Cook, they'll still only give him 2 people. The other people who are generally favorable towards Trump on the Federal Open Market Committee voted with Powell this time. So Trump might not view them positively. Anyway, that is where the Fed is as of today. Let me just remind you to support the show. It's a show made possible through support from people like you. I couldn't do this without you. And the best way to support the show right now, this moment, and to enhance the live show, to make the live show even better, is for you to ask questions. Make comments in the super chat, because I read all of those. I comment on them. I answer them. I respond to everything. And it's a way for you to shape the show, and it makes it more interesting and more fun. So please participate, come in, ask a question, put a few bucks on it, and that way we raise the money to make the show possible, and we also interact more, and again, you get to determine the topics we cover in the show. All right, let's see. Oops, that's a different story. By the way, a lot of stories all over the place about this political violence. Is it on the increase? Is it not? And again, all the numbers I'm seeing. The Economist had a big story on it yesterday, or a few days ago. All right, so you know how Donald Trump has used the IEEPA. He's declared it an economic emergency. And as part of that economic emergency, using the IEEPA, which is a law, an economic emergency law that gives the president the authority to declare an economic emergency and do certain things. And Trump has declared that as part of those things, he is going to impose tariffs. And the whole retaliatory tariffs, the whole April thing, most of the tariffs, not all of them, most of the tariffs that are being imposed now are through this IEEPA. And Trump claims this authority. The Supreme Court will decide whether he really has it. There will be hearing arguments about that in November, and we'll make a decision early next year. So at some point, we'll decide at least what the court thinks about whether he has this authority or not. But anyway, the reality is that according to this law, Congress must review the emergency every 6 months. So here's the language of the law. Not later than 6 months after a national emergency is declared, and not later than the end of each 6-month period thereafter, that such an emergency continues, each House of Congress shall meet to consider a vote on a joint resolution to determine whether that emergency shall be terminated. So it gives Congress the responsibility, not just the option, but the responsibility to every 6 months check in and say, no, emergency. No, we're going to vote it down or vote it up or whatever. Trump declared this emergency about 6 months ago. And the House is avoiding this. It's basically ignoring the law. Speaker Johnson has gamed the House rules to constantly block any attempt to consider this. There are proposals on the table in the House, including by Massey, the Republican, to vote down the emergency and thus eliminate the tariffs. And yet, he can't get a vote because Johnson won't allow it. And they keep burying it. And supposedly, now, in one of the rules that was just passed, they have managed to defer any consideration of this emergency status until March of 2026, which is an explicit defiance of the law. There's nothing you can do about it, right? If Congress decides that it won't abide by the laws that it writes, I don't think there's anything they can do about it. This is the breakdown of the rule of law. It's the breakdown of our system of government. Congress is supposed to write the laws and make sure they're followed and follow them itself. It should penalize the executive when he doesn't follow the law. It should impeach judges when they don't follow the law. It should overturn a president, overrule a president when he's not following the law. But here, Congress itself refuses to follow the law. So they won't review this until March of 2026, and if the tariffs are still standing in March of 2026, if they haven't been overturned by the court, I have a feeling that Speaker Johnson will find a way to push them out into the future. And one of the great tragedies of America over the last probably 20 years is that Congress, but certainly over the last 10 years, Congress has completely defaulted on its responsibilities. It is handing more and more and more power to the executive. It is refusing to have any oversight over that executive, Democrat or Republican. And when they do, like they went after impeaching Trump, they impeach him on trivialities, on stupidities, instead of something substantive like this, or like TikTok, or like a million other ways in which Trump is literally violating the law, going against the Constitution. But they don't have the balls or the courage to do that. So anyway, Congress is basically doing everything they can to avoid bringing to a vote some kind of resolution that eliminates the state of emergency, economic state of emergency, and thus eliminate the tariffs. Partially because Johnson knows it'll gain a majority. There'll just be enough Republicans voting for it with the Democrats that it could actually pass. And he, of course, doesn't want that. I'm not sure what's going on in the Senate, because it says both houses of Congress. So I'm not sure what happens in the Senate. Maybe it first has to go in the House. The Senate can't take it up until it starts. I mean, if we're going to save our system of government, I think the first step that has to happen is Congress, in the House and in the Senate, are going to have to grow some balls. Going to have to take their responsibility seriously. Are going to have to reestablish and re-engage with their constitutional role. If they're going to default on the constitutional role, then it's going to be very difficult to save this government. Very difficult. System of government. I mean, courts can make decisions. Courts can change things. Courts can hold things back. But at the end of the day, it's Congress that passes laws. Congress that has to hold the president accountable at the end of the day. And if Congress doesn't do that, the courts can only do so much. By the way, we're getting more and more studies about tariffs and about who bears the cost of tariffs. And this is a study that came out looking at Chinese goods. And it looks like Chinese exporters maybe have absorbed less than 3% of the 27% increase in tariffs this year. Maybe 3%. Everything else, you are paying. One way or the other. Whether there's an investor in business or whether there's a consumer, you are paying. Yes. All right. Cocaine. So, cocaine is becoming popular again. It's cool to snort cocaine in America. Demand for cocaine has gone through the roof. Consumption is growing. And what's interesting this time is it's not just in America. It's growing even faster in Europe. Cocaine use all over the world is up dramatically. Americans, after going through a period of getting hooked on opioids and fentanyl and all kinds of stuff like that, are back to cocaine. They're back to their first love. Consumption in Western United States has increased 54% since 2019, up 19% during that same period in the eastern part of the country. So it's primarily in the West that people are using cocaine. And now, I usually wouldn't even mention this. I mean, who cares, right? Cocaine is up. It's in the context of the idea of the war on drugs. We've got this intense war on drugs going on, and it's being intensified. And we saw ships in the Caribbean Sea. We're seeing F-35s in Puerto Rico. We're seeing the bombings of boats off the shore of Venezuela that the administration is claiming are drug smugglers, but they have no proof of that, and they have presented no evidence, and it's dubious whether they have the legal authority to kill drug smugglers or people they claim to be drug smugglers in international waters. It's just bizarre that they could do that. Hey, that boat's a drug smuggling boat. Boom, let's blow them up. I mean, they've done it to 3 boats so far. Killed, 15 people. By what authority? Has Congress passed a law that allows the president to approve the killing of accused, suspected cartel members? The whole thing. And again, this is where Congress is completely failing. Why isn't Congress saying something about this? Why aren't there hearings about this? Why aren't they acting to rein the president in on this? Or at least get more information about what the hell's going on? Nothing. Complete silence from Congress. But what's interesting about it is we've been involved in, we've been involved in a war against drugs. Against drugs. I mean, you can't have a war against an inanimate object, but what they call the war on drugs. Since the early 1970s. 70s. So 50 plus years. And what have we achieved? Nothing. Death and destruction, corruption, lots of dead people, and really, 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 really powerful cartels all over the world who run the drug trade. That's what we've achieved. Has drug use come down? No. Are less people dying from overdose? No. Are drugs safer? No. I mean, what's going on? And, you know, will Trump, because he's tough, because he's a man's man, he's a macho guy, is Trump going to be successful where others have not? What does it take to win the war on drugs? Blowing up ships in the Caribbean? It's interesting because fentanyl, almost all the fentanyl coming into the United States is smuggled in from Canada. Oh, no, sorry. I'm from Mexico. Canada was accused of that, and therefore tariffs were placed on it. From Mexico, almost all of it. And almost all of the cocaine that comes from a place like Colombia goes into the United States from the Pacific side. I'm not sure who exactly is getting bombed in the Caribbean. I'm sure some drug smuggling is happening there, but it's not the main route. I mean, the goal of what Trump is doing is to go after Venezuela. But here's the thing. So, you know, the U.S. has been going after cartels in Mexico significantly, and they've you know, cut deals with Mexico to go after some of these cartels, and you know, the U.S. Got the Mexicans to really go after the what do you call it? The what's the name of that cartel? This, it starts with an S. The Sinaloa cartel, right? So they got the Mexicans to go after that. You know, there's been a war within the Sinaloa. They've really chipped away at their influence. They've caught, you know, Guzman, the big shot in the Sinaloa cartel. It's all the way back to 2016. They've really weakened the biggest cartel out there, the Sinaloa cartel. So what has happened? What has happened? Well, what's happened is somebody stepped in and replaced them. So now you've got this other cartel, right? There's a big story about it in the Wall Street Journal. You know, called the Oseguera cartel. It's a Guerra cartel. The leader of it is a 59-year-old Nemesio Mencho Oseguera. And he's basically bigger and stronger than the Senator. And his specialty is cocaine. And, you know, he grew up, this guy who runs the cartel, grew up poor, selling avocados. And now he's one of the richest people maybe in the world as a drug lord. So what have we done? Yeah, we killed some bad guys and incentivized other bad guys to fill in the gap. We've destroyed some cartels and emboldened other cartels to grow even bigger. This is not, you're not going to win this. There is demand. There's demand for these drugs. People are willing to pay a lot of money for these drugs. And they're going to be people, bad people, who come in and use violence to fill the supply, to make sure the demand is met, and to make money in the process. And they might be called Sinaloa, something else, or Jalisco cartel, or this cartel, or that cartel. One dies, another one will just rise up to replace it. The war on drugs is a dead end. whether you fight it in the waters of the Caribbean or wherever you fight it. I mean, even if you invade Mexico tomorrow and take Mexico over, drugs will continue to flow to the United States of America. There is no scenario. I mean, think about prohibition. Did it stop alcohol? Did alcohol consumption decline? I mean, the types of alcohol changed, but no. Same thing with drugs. You can't stop it. The only solution to drugs is to legalize it, at least get the violence out of the way. And if people want to take cocaine, who am I to say they shouldn't? So, the war on drugs is, all it does is it gets a lot of innocent people killed. A lot of innocent people killed. It completely disrupts the countries in where the drugs are grown and shipped through in order to get to market. And it's a massive distraction. It's a massive consumption of dollars to contain. It's a massive waste of our resources. Drugs shouldn't be legalized, not because I love drugs, but because I think it's none of my business if you want to take them, but B, because people are dying. And there's no way to win this. I mean, how many years now have we, as the United States, tried to stop the growing of cocaine in Colombia? Forever. It hasn't stopped. And now, Colombian drugs, for a variety of reasons, are going to Ecuador. Right? In Ecuador, this is creating a huge gang problem in Ecuador. Cartels have entered Ecuador because now it's a transportation hub between Colombia and Mexico. Then the drugs get put on boats. This is why most of the drugs come from the Pacific. They get put on boats that are then shipped via the Galapagos Islands, of all places, to Mexico. Galapagos is where you refuel. And then, you head towards Mexico. Mexico has deployed special forces to try to stop the drugs from coming in. They can't. They're overwhelmed. There's just not enough of them. And then you take them along within Mexico. Either the one cartel controls the coast, so it takes possession of the drugs and then passes on to other cartels that are responsible for delivering it to the United States. And they're delivered into the United States through tunnels underneath Trump's wall and through any other routes that you can get in. And nobody's disrupted that. I mean, it's disrupted, but it hasn't stopped. And it's not going to stop. And again, you could switch out, you can arrest these guys. It's like killing the leaders of a terrorist organization. You get new leaders, killing a leader of a cartel, destroying a whole cartel, you get a new cartel. Too many opportunities. Too many opportunities. Anyway, the cartels are only becoming more sophisticated, using more technology, bigger, more sophisticated weapon systems. And the delusion that people are under that this can be stopped is truly absurd. But hey, that doesn't stop anybody. Absurdity. So much absurdity in this world. And yet, it doesn't stop anybody. All right, what do we have? We still have a couple of topics, right? Oh, we have genocide, pages, and IVF. All right, let's start with genocide. So the UN came out with a report that says Israel's committing genocide. Israel's committing genocide. I mean, the report is amateurish, stupid, ridiculous, filled with contradictions. For example, the report accuses Netanyahu of making no distinction between combatants and civilians. In the same statement, they recognize that he told Palestinians in Gaza to leave. because the operation is going to happen. In other words, he urged non-combatants to leave the area. And they say, well, but that is no distinction between combatants and non-combatants, because he knows the Palestinians in Gaza have nowhere to go. Well, but they do have to go, places to go. They have these humanitarian zones that have been set up where they can go and they can live, and Israel generally doesn't bother them there. So, you know, just lie after lie. Or, for example, here's a sentence from the report. Based on the above, the Commission finds that the Israeli security forces were aware that their military operations since 7 October 2023 would cause the deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. Yeah, it's a war. Some people will die. Furthermore, considering the duration of the military operation and reports of high numbers of deaths, high by what standard, it is reasonable to find that the Israeli authorities knew of a high number of casualties in Gaza since 7 October 2023. Okay, if you define high as those numbers, doesn't seem high to me at all. Nevertheless, Israeli authorities did not intervene to change the means and method of warfare employed. On the contrary, the military operation persisted over time and caused even more Palestinian deaths. Yeah, it's called war. The Commission therefore finds that the Israeli authorities intended to kill as many Palestinians as possible through their military operations in Gaza since 7th of October 2023. Wait! That is a inference that you cannot make. There's no logic there. The logic just broke down. Israel knew their military operations would kill Palestinians. They didn't change their military operations to stop killing Palestinians, because you can't do that. Therefore, they intended to kill as many Palestinians as possible? No, Israel could have killed many more Palestinians if they wanted to. I mean, they could have indiscriminately bombed the entire place into oblivion indiscriminately, and you would have 1 million people dead by now. But they didn't. It's unbelievable. It's just a leap to a conclusion that they had pre-decided, and they're trying to fluff it up and make some things that look like logical arguments beforehand. But the logic doesn't flow. So the Commission therefore finds that the Israeli authorities intended to kill as many Palestinians as possible through its military operations in Gaza since 7 October 2023, and knew that the means and method of warfare employed would cause mass death of Palestinians, including children. Mass deaths. What is mass death? Is it 10,000, 100,000, 1 million? How do you define it? I guess any deaths, if they're Palestinians and if they're Jews doing it, count as mass deaths to the United Nations. Of course, Israel knew that civilians would die in its operation in Gaza, including children. So did Hamas. Hamas knew that when they did October 7th. They knew Israel would retaliate and Palestinians would die. Every time Hamas attacks Israeli troops, they know that in counterattacking, some Palestinians will die. Nature of war. Suddenly in an urban setting. Hamas is not responsible? No. Israel is responsible. And the UN knows, the people who wrote this know, that the only way to avoid civilian casualties is not to go to war. And that's what they really want. They want Israel to disarm. It wants Israel to surrender, and for the slaughter of Israelis to continue. I mean, why should it stop on October 7th? It should have gone on. They would want it to. God forbid the Israeli army kill any Palestinians. So they're redefining genocide to include any war in which a country knows there will be civilian deaths, which means every war now is genocide. There are no wars in which only military forces engage. I mean, Russia's committing genocide in Ukraine, and there's every war on the planet is a genocide. It's truly insane. So, yeah, I mean, and they cite reports that have been countered. They cite, they cite this U.S. Green Beret who says that Israel purposely launched, tank rounds and mortar rounds into crowds of unarmed Palestinians. Even that doesn't constitute genocide, by the way, if that were true. But it's not true. And it's been contradicted by many, many others who were there. Indeed, the report was written by somebody who in 2022 was condemned by the UN Secretary General as a blatant anti-Semite. A guy named Milun Kothari. Even the head of UNRWA, saying a lot, called him an anti-Semite. And somebody here writes that that's like being called a fascist by Benito Mussolini, because the head of UNRWA would know an anti-Semite if they saw him. They saw one. It really is unbelievable. Really is unbelievable the extent to which hatred of Israel, and by extension hatred of Jews, is so common in the world out there. All right, finally, a couple of good news stories, particularly this one. This is, today marks the 1 year since the pager operation, one of the greatest intelligence military operations in the history of mankind. Israel sold Hezbollah pagers that had explosive devices in them, and they activated those explosive devices a year ago today. Thousands of pagers exploded simultaneously in Lebanon, causing mass injuries, many deaths among a group of Hezbollah operatives, people who had pages for the Hezbollah. So these are many of the senior leaders of Hezbollah, many of the operational leaders of the Hezbollah, thousands of them. And many of them died. Some of them lost an eye. Some of them lost other parts of their bodies. The next day, of course, as Hezbollah moved to using walkie-talkies, it turned out those walkie-talkies were detonated because they'd been bought, I guess, from the same source. And a few hundred more were injured as a consequence. This is the kind of targeted precision warfare that Israel has engaged in incredibly effectively. This is the opposite of genocide. Now, by the way, did civilians die in this? Yeah. If you were the daughter of a terrorist and you picked up one of the pages and it blew up, if you were wife of, neighbor of, yeah. People who are, quote, innocent got hurt. But that's the nature of war. And if you don't want them to get hurt, don't start wars. Don't start wars. Finally, where is this? There it is, yes. Finally, there's this fascinating story today. In the, it's in Wired, but it's also cited in ScienceDirect.com, OrchardHealth.com. There's this story about the founder and CEO of a company called Orchard, a biotech company. Basically, he was at the Wired Health Summit last week. And he was saying that in the near future, he thinks that more and more parents are going to choose to use IVF as the means of having children rather than the natural means. And the reason for that is that right now, a company like Orchard can do whole genome screening of embryos for IVF. So you could analyze the DNA of different embryos, and you can select the one that has the least likelihood to have cancer, to have Alzheimer's. I mean, we know exactly which genes dramatically increase the probability of Alzheimer's. You can select your child not to have those. Parents can significantly lower the risk of their kids having genetic conditions. You know, there's a huge potential here, and it looks like having children in the future is going to be very different than it has been in the past. For example, an estimated 4% of people worldwide have a disease that's caused by a single genetic mutation, one gene. 4%. You could screen those embryos out. Now think about that. That means those embryos will never become human. Ooh, some of you are squirming. If you're squirming, there's a little bit of religion still stuck in there. Some of those embryos will never become human. They might be destroyed. They might be flushed down the toilet. So, artificial insemination, IVF, screen, choose the baby you want, and you screen 5, you implant 1, the one that has the least possibility of having genetic diseases. And if you do this, we could really make a dent in just the existence of genetic diseases in the population, because you start screening them out. That is great news, in my view. Now, if that leads to a decline in sex, that would be bad. But if that just leads to a decline in disease, then it's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Sometimes right now they implant more than one IVF, so they're implanting more than one embryo. But it's not clear that that's going to be true in the future. As they get better at this, as they understand it more, as more and more healthy couples are going to get IVF rather than couples that are having difficulty, it might be the case that it's just one embryo. I think we'll get to that point, and that's when the screening makes the most sense. All right, you can check out Orchard Biotech to get out more information about this. And there's an article about it in Wired magazine, which is interesting. All right, that is the news for Wednesday, September 17th. So this is where I remind you of a few things. One is, this show is funded by support from you. Can't exist without you guys. And we have goals. Every show, about $250 an hour, is about how much we need to raise in order to make this worthwhile. And we generally make that. And sometimes we exceed it, so on average we make it. Today we're not. So we're short $62 just to make the first hour is $250. So please take that into account. If you want to support the show, now's the time to support the show and help us achieve the goal. And of course, our second hour goal is $500, and we're way off of that. So I encourage you to consider using the super chat or stickers to get us closer to the goal. That was the one thing I wanted to say. What was the other thing? Yeah, got sponsors. Gotta talk about the sponsors. Hendershot Wealth. Hendershot with 2 T's. HendershotWealth.com/YBS. You'll find information about how to really save quite a bit of money on capital gains taxes. How to set yourself up so that when you sell the business or when you sell your stock, you won't have to pay that much, and you'll be able to defer them into the future. By defer them into the future, you get to gain from the appreciation of the money you would have paid in taxes. I talk about this with Robert Hendershot in great depth. I think anybody interested in finance and taxes and finance should watch this. It's on my channel on a playlist for sponsors, and you can find it. It's me and Robert Hendershot talking about deferring capital gains taxes. So please do that. Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor. The Ayn Rand Institute is it would encourage you to sign up. I would encourage you to sign up for their Ayn Rand Institute Live. This is a program of courses that you can take live. You can take, with the Professor Dan, ask questions live with other students, or you can take it by video later. You can do your homework assignments or not. You can, they'll even offer you a coach, a career coach, a study coach. So I think an amazing program, real intensive, but you can do it at your pace. And you'll really increase your knowledge significantly of the philosophy of objectivism. So go to aynrand.org/start here, click on the link for Ayn Rand Institute Live, and check out the courses that they've got offered in October. You get a discount as being a YBS listener, 25 YBS 10. 25 YBS 10. Put that in discount code, you get a 10% discount. Go sign up or check it out. See if you think it's something you would want to do. And then finally, Alex Epstein. Alex Epstein is the leading authority on all things energy. He is now very involved in kind of helping set energy policy in a Trump administration, regulatory policy vis-a-vis climate change in a Trump administration. He's doing amazing work, and you guys should support him. And it's not a matter of supporting him financially. I don't think that's what's needed. You guys should support him by subscribing and by using the material you get from him to educate the world out there about these issues. He puts out talking points that really help, really help get you up to speed about what's going on and how to communicate what's going on in the world out there. All right, those are sponsors. You can become a regular supporter of the Yaron Brook Show, a monthly supporter, by going to Patreon, patreon.com, becoming a monthly supporter, anything from $2 to $1,000 a month. $1,000 would be great. $2 would be great. Please consider doing that. It's the best way to support the show. You can also do it on PayPal, but Patreon is just a little bit easier, and you get the perk of, if you do Patreon at over $10 a month, you get a free feed for the podcast with no commercials. No commercials. A lot of you have been asking me for that. We are now providing that for anybody who gives more than $10 a month on Patreon. Not a huge amount. All right, guys, we made quite a bit of progress in the last few minutes on the Super Chat goal. Wes, thank you for the $50 sticker. And let's see if we got some other stickers. We've got quite a few questions. Normative Randoid, thank you. And John, thank you. And Jonathan Honing, thank you. Again, Alan, thank you. Fender Hopper, thank you. Nick, thank you. Mike, thank you. Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the support. And keep it coming. We still have $240 to go to make it to our second hour goal, and we are in the second hour, well into the second hour, well into the second hour. So please consider supporting the show. Stickers are welcome, by the way. Stickers are great. No question. All right, let's start with Michael. Michael starts us off, as he often does, with a $50 question. Why do super wealthy people move to Puerto Rico? If you have that level of money, isn't it worth it to eat the taxes so you can live comfortably in America? I understand living in Puerto Rico if you're trying to build wealth, but once you already have it, because nobody likes to pay taxes. It's a reduction in your wealth. It's a reduction in your income. It's a reduction in what you can do with your money. And if you're a billionaire, your money's still valuable to you. Now, I'd say, I don't know that many billionaires have moved to Puerto Rico. I don't know of any. A number of, people worth hundreds of millions of dollars have moved to Puerto Rico. Tens of millions of dollars have certainly moved to Puerto Rico. I don't know of any billionaires, although I'm sure there's some. But whatever your amount of wealth is, means you have certain ambitions. You want to go to Mars, you want to build something, you want to create something, you want to give it away and give more of it rather than the government taking it away. You're pissed off at Washington and the way they use it. And you can live, you can live in this neighborhood that's run by the Ritz-Carlton in Dorado, Puerto Rico, at a very high standard of living. You can buy a $30 million home there, $40 million home right on the beach. Gorgeous architecture, modern, much nicer than anything you'll see in most communities in the United States. Modern, big homes with glass windows, overlooking the ocean, walking to the beach. I mean, why not? And you don't pay taxes. And you only have to be in Puerto Rico 183 days a year. You can spend the rest in Monte Carlo or in Europe or in some in America, a lot in America. You could travel the world. But if you're in Puerto Rico 183 days, and actually technically, if you're not in the United States the rest of the time, you could actually only be in Puerto Rico 153 days. And you can be anywhere else in the world as well. Why not? Why not make it your primary residence and then buy a home in London and buy a home in Singapore and buy a home on the French Riviera and in New York City and shuttle between those places, but make that beautiful home on the beach where you can see the water and you've got good internet and you can communicate with the world. Why not make that your primary residency and not have to pay federal taxes and pay an effective rate, kosher, if you do everything right and legal, and if you have the right kind of business, of 4% instead of over 50 in some states. So it's a big difference. It's a big difference. That's why they do it. I don't think, I mean, it's true that if you have a lot of money, and yeah, if you pay taxes, you still have a lot of money, and you can still live well in the U.S. that way, but you're still giving away. I mean, you're having half your income taken, millions of dollars in some people, tens of millions of dollars in some cases. Jennifer, Destiny said on Pierre Morgan's show that he will not condemn Cook's murder until Trump tells people to calm down. I think that's stupid, really stupid. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The two are unrelated. He should condemn Cook's murder and demand that Trump act like a human being. So that is an unfortunate position Destiny is taking, a bad position Destiny is taking. Paul, why do you think no one comes to the military defense of the Palestinians when virtually the entire world opposes Israel? Well, because, I mean, they're not willing to die for the Palestinians. They oppose Israel. They'll put sanctions on Israel. They'll take an economic hit for the Palestinians, but they're not willing to die for the Palestinians. And really, they're not willing to commit that much money to the Palestinians. They also know Israel has nukes. Israel has ballistic missiles that can travel a long way. Israel can reach, I'm pretty sure, every country in Europe and can reach Moscow with its missiles. You can see the kind of reach it has with airplanes. The entire Middle East is theirs in that sense. I also believe, in spite of all, journals, all these military journals that come out with a ranking of the world's best armies and so on, I think pound for pound, Israel has the best army in the world. And not pound for pound, it probably has the third best army in the world. Maybe, I wouldn't want to be any military in the world going up against the Israelis. I don't think any Air Force in the world matches up to the Israeli Air Force. Maybe American pilots, but I don't think they are. They don't have the experience. So Israeli, Air Force is probably the best in the world. Now, America could overwhelm it with quantity. So could the Chinese. And maybe the Russians if they stormed the border, but it's not clear because Israel has so much more weapons and air dominance over Russia that it's not clear that even if they put 1 million troops along the borders with Israel, Russia would win, given the air dominance that Israel would have. So who's going to take them up on it? Who wants to suffer the casualties? For whom? For the Palestinians, who none of them really like, admire, respect. They do it out of a sense of altruism, not out of a sense of caring, not out of a sense of liking, not out of a sense of valuing, out of a sense of we need to sacrifice to these, but not too much. Altruists in the modern era, how many Mother Teresas are there? How many people in the world out there really do give their kidneys to a stranger? Not that many. Not both their kidneys, one kidney. Rob C. says, I just learned about the Fabians and their role in forming the original UK Labour Party. Do you think that explains a lot about the state of the UK right now? Yes and no, right? So the Fabians were a product of the intellectual environment in the UK and in Europe more broadly, of the intellectual bankruptcy of the West. Socialism was very strong and has deep roots in England. This is why, Karl Marx found it, established his home there and did much of his writing in the British Museum, in the British Library. So the United Kingdom is dominated by the same intellectual forces, and it's those intellectual forces that would have shaped the Labour Party and ultimately the Conservative Party, and one of so the mess that the UK is in today is a consequence of those intellectual forces over the last 100+ years. And if you had to pinpoint whose fault it is, you'd have to say that the real issue is that there was never an alternative. The real issue in the UK and in the US and everywhere really is what's the alternative to the left? A pathetic conservative movement that wants to conserve what? What does it want to conserve? Tradition? Why? So the state of the UK right now and the state of the world in many respects is that there is no real capitalist political party. There's no political party that stands up for individual rights. There's no political party that stands up for free markets. There's no political party that stands up for liberty and freedom. You have wishy-washy conservatives who kind of believed in free markets and kind of believed in individual rights, but kind of means they didn't. And they couldn't compete for violating rights with the socialists. So they had to lose in the end. Look at Boris Johnson. He had this overwhelming majority and couldn't do anything. Couldn't do anything. Because he's a statist. He's not a freedom lover. So you can't get a freedom-loving government from a non-freedom-loving intellectual and political party. So the real cause of the current situation is that the Labour Party has never really faced opposition. Maybe with the exception of Margaret Thatcher for a very short period of time. Andrew, one of the things ARI is doing is promoting and growing a corpus of works that a genius can use to propel their own work. A few principled geniuses could launch Objectivism and change the world faster than we think. I hope so. I hope so. Geniuses are born all the time in a sense of the raw talent, the raw machinery, but you need a culture that nourishes them. And we don't have such a culture. So I don't know what happens to those geniuses, but let's hope some of them discover Ayn Rand and help us move it into a dominant position in the culture. All right, let's see how we're doing. We're chipping away at it, but very slowly, and it's going to be difficult. We've got a half an hour, 29 minutes. We've got, I don't know, 15 questions or so, and we've got a $200. We've got to raise $200. So, if any of you out there can do $50, $100, that would help a lot. Help a lot. Help us get to where we need to be in terms of the goal for this show. Super chat or a sticker, any of those would be great. Kim, why do some people brainwash themselves with religion? Religion never appealed to me. I don't know why. You know, it's what everybody around them does. It's what they're raised with. There's a sense in which it's easy if you don't want to take responsibility for your own life and use your own mind. Religion never appealed to me either. I was an atheist at age 6 and never looked back for a second. Lucinda, waffles or pancakes, which is better? I think probably pancakes, but you know, I don't like some pancakes. They have to be like interesting pancakes. I don't know, made of not just plain white flour. So, something of interest. I had some really good pancakes made from, I don't know, sweet potato or something, something like that. They were really good in Lisbon. But yeah, I prefer pancakes. But I don't eat any of them because I've been low carb for the last 25 years, or not 25. I've been low carb probably 22 or 3 years. So I don't eat pancakes or waffles. I have to admit that though, in Italy, I'm eating pasta and I'm eating a lot of bread. I'll have to go on a massive diet when I get home, cut all that out of my thing. I'm worried about blood sugar, and all my blood numbers are going to be freaking out for my trip to Europe, particularly Italy. Italy, it's very difficult to eat in Italy, healthy in Italy. I find. I mean, Florence, every restaurant's a steakhouse. Bistecca alla Florentine. We've eaten amazing steaks, maybe the best steaks of our lives. Here but too many steaks, too much meat, and then pizza, and then pasta, and then cheese soufflés, and I mean, I don't even want to know what my cholesterol and all those other numbers are right now. And the bread is really good bread. I mean, not all bread. I mean, 2 restaurants today, and the bread was like really bad. But then another restaurant, bread was really good. So, I mean, yeah, when the bread here is good, it's really good. So, I'm trying to, so once we get back to Puerto Rico, I'll go on my usual diet, which is no desserts, no bread, no pasta, very little cheese, meats, but not overdoing it on red meat. All right. Lucinda says, let's get to this goal. And she put 50 euro into that. So she's serious. So come on, guys. Somebody should be able to match Lucinda's passion and deep pockets. And we're only $143 away, maybe $41 away from our goal now. Michael, the only reason the video went viral with the Ukrainian goal was due to racism. While violent crime is overall down, this country has become more explicitly racist. Well, I mean, that's part of it, but the other part of it was how scary it was, how just brutal it was. And in a culture where we're used to seeing that in movies and in video games, to see something that really happened, people are fascinated by that, and they watch stuff like that. You know, the whole, I guess, networks of people who watch snuff videos. I mean, not videos that created for them, but videos online of people dying from wars, from these cameras on you know, in crime scenes and things like that. There are a lot of sick people out there, but then there's just a lot of curiosity out there about violence. People like to watch violence. And I do think the country's more racist now than it was 20 years ago. And I think the reason for that is that the left became racist really in numbers about 15 years ago. The left has become more and more and more racist over the last 15 years. At least until BLM. Maybe that's down a little bit now. And the right responded. As I said during BLM, you want to play the race card? The right will play it right back at you. So racism on the right has increased dramatically, I think, over the last 20 years. Racism on the right was going away or declining significantly. And it has come back in spades. Now, it's always been there. There's always been racism in this country. But I think it is true that the country is more racist now than in a long time. In a long time. And it's both sides. And that's not boathism, it's just both sides. Gulag, it's a weird name. How do you stop the election of authoritarians in a democracy? How do you ensure the preservation of individual rights if some loon can be voted in? Well, I mean, you do that with a strong constitution. And I think we can learn from the last 250 years of a constitutional republic in the United States on how to make the Constitution even stronger than it is. We haven't had an authoritarian to a large extent because of our Constitution. So you reject democracy, you embrace constitutionalism and republicanism, but ultimately, the only way to eliminate authoritarianism is to preserve a free society, is to restrict politics to such a narrow band of human life that they have very little power over us. And it's not attractive to the power lusters because there's very little power to get, because the Constitution explicitly negates so much of what today's politicians do. It needs to negate them. So if you had a separation of state from economics, and state from science, and state from education, and state from ideas, then, you know, Congress would meet once a year for 3 months, maybe. The president would be super weak. Everything would go through Congress. There'd be a Supreme Court that was very activist in a sense of knocking stuff down if they even sniffed something again going against the Constitution. And it wouldn't become an attractive place to be. And those kind of principles would then be imposed on state governments, and state governments would not be allowed to violate the Constitution either. That's part of the lesson of the Constitution. So the states wouldn't be violating your rights. And that's the only way. If you have a pure democracy, you can't stop it. A pure democracy will always descend into a mixed economy, will always therefore descend into a gang warfare between pressure groups and who can grab more stuff, because the stuff is just available, because democracy allows you to take from some and give to others. And it turns into a partisan gang warfare existence, which can only then be rectified and settled and calmed down with an authoritarian. So, yes, democracy will lead always to authoritarianism, real democracy. You have to limit democracy, you have to limit the power of government as much as possible. Vikram Bajaj, a few days ago you said that buying gold was a world is going to crash hedge, but that you didn't think we were quite there yet. I hold a good chunk of gold, ETFs. The momentum in gold has been great in my portfolio. I think more upside is left yet. Your thoughts? Well, first, you have to realize that ETFs are not a hedge against the world ending. Because when the world ends, or when things go really, really, really bad, it'll be very hard to, in a sense, get the value out of that paper that you hold. Whereas if you hold gold, actual gold bars, and actual gold coins, then those will become real currency they'll have real value when the crash comes. If the crash is really, really end of the world-ish type crash. I get that it's been a great investment. Good for you, good for anybody who's made money off of it, good for people who invested in Bitcoin and made a lot of money off of it. I don't know what the foundation of it is other than kind of end of the world scenarios. Hyperinflation or World War III or things like that. So I don't know how to value it. I don't know how to value gold. Any more than, I can value it a little bit better than I can value Bitcoin, but not much. So I don't know if it has more upside. I have no idea. Now, is uncertainty going to continue? Yes. Does the price of gold benefit from uncertainty? Yes. So in that sense, there might be upside. In the sense that I think as long as Trump is the president, and maybe well beyond that, we will be living on the cusp of some cataclysmic event of great uncertainty, and that's good for gold. But if Trump calms down because he's getting old, or because he's in his latter part of his second term, or if somebody else comes to be president and thinks, then gold could be worth a lot less than it is right now. A lot less, as people sell gold and move their funds into productive assets. Ultimately, productive assets is where you want to be. Ultimately, in the long run, productive assets are what produce wealth. Gold doesn't produce wealth. And the fact that gold has gone up so much, so quickly, it doesn't make any sense. Wealth is not being destroyed elsewhere by that amount. So I'd worry, given the run-up, maybe it's time to sell. I certainly wouldn't re-up. All right, Roland, tell us more about the great work arts you've seen in Florence. I'm going to do a show on it, and hopefully I'll have photographs to show you. But yeah, I mean, every day we go to a different museum. Every day we go to a different place and see great artworks. It's been truly amazing. Today we were at the Palazzo Vecchio, which is an amazing palace. It's where the Florentine government was run from, and ultimately when it became the duchy, when the Cosimo de' Medici became the Duke, it became his home in a sense. It's also adjacent to the Uffizi, and there's a secret passageway where the Medicis could go to the Uffizi, where they had all the art. But the palace itself has a lot of art. It has one Michelangelo original, an almost complete, not complete, I'd say 75% complete, maybe less, maybe 65% complete sculpture that was supposed to be a part of Pope Julius's tomb. It also had a bunch of paintings by frescoes and wood paintings on wood on the ceiling. So it got a stiff neck. By Vasari. Vasari is well known as being the historian of art of Venice. He wrote the first biographies of the great artists, of Michelangelo, of the great artists of the Renaissance. Anyway, he was also a painter and a sculptor, and he painted much of it, and a lot of it was quite beautiful, quite amazing. This trip, I discovered I really, really like Filippo Lippi. Filippo Lippi, a Renaissance artist, very influenced by Botticelli. But Filippo Lippi did all religious paintings, but they're really beautiful, really beautiful. I've gained added appreciation. I always had it, but even a greater appreciation for Renaissance art and its beauty and its diversity and what you can do. Yesterday we saw Donatello's David. Here's an interesting fact for you. Donatello's David is the first sculpture in the West, in Western civilization, to be in the round. That is, you could view it from 360 degrees and fully naked. So it's since, so it's not the first, right? Since Roman Empire. So for about 1,000 years, the Christians didn't allow for nudity. And here we're talking about male nudity. Didn't allow a penis to appear in a sculpture or a painting. And suddenly, once Donatello put a penis on David and portrayed him naked for the first time since the Romans, a sculpture of a naked man. Sculptures of naked men exploded in Florence. And it was stunning how many sculptures at the Palazzo Vecchio of naked men wrestling, naked men doing all kinds of things. And one of the sculptures was pretty. I'll show you a photo of it. One guy has the other guy by the balls. Literally, he's holding, and his penis is floating around. It's amazing that they had no qualms about this. This is Christian Florence in the 15th century. 15th century. And you can actually tell a sculpture or painting when it's from the middle of the 16th century, because the penises disappear. It's not gay, they're fighting. What are you talking about? And even if it is gay, yeah, so. In the 16th century, mid-16th century, penises disappear because as part of the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic answer to Luther, they cover up the nudity. They go back to being Christian Puritans. So there's a period of about 100 years where nudity is allowed, and then it goes away again. It really is fascinating. By the way, Luther one of the things he hated about the Catholics is they allowed the Renaissance. So the Protestants were super Puritan, and that's why, art flourished in the South and didn't really flourish until much later. And when it did, it was very restrained. It's only broke through. Painting and sculpture only break through from the restraints placed on it by the Reformation in the 19th century, in a secular era where religion is sidelined. Anyway, that's a little bit art history, art theory from Yaron. I'll talk more about that. I'll do a members-only show about Florence with pictures. Marius, are you aware of the CCP amassing a lot of gold and dealing increasingly in yuan instead of dollars? Yes, but the reality is they're not going to go on a gold standard, A, because that would take control, that would reduce the control the central government has over money, and it's the last thing they want. And B, there's only so many countries in the world that are willing to trade with China with yuan, because the reality is that nobody trusts them. Nobody trusts the Chinese. They'll manipulate their currency. So the dollar is not safe because the dollar is good. The dollar's safe is because everybody else is crazier than the Americans, at least for now. Now, the dollar is declining in value. It's declined a lot this year because of Trump, almost 10%, and is likely to continue to decline. I just don't see it collapsing, which is, that is a world switching to reserve currency of the yuan. I just don't see that. But again, not because the dollar is good, certainly not under Trump, but because people distrust China even more than they distrust the United States. Andrew, constant political declarations of emergency would be checked in a rational society, but a society of emotionalists constantly fall for them. Irrationalists are home with the feeling of panic. Yes, I mean, they love the declaration of emergency. It confirms their sense of life. It confirms their sense of panic. It confirms the badness of the world, and they run from it. So yes, the irrationality, panic, emergency, catastrophizing, all of that goes together. The more we teach our kids not to think, the more they become emotionalists. The more they fear, the more tribalist they become, the more scared they become, the more tribalist they become, the more scared they become. It's Not the opposite of a virtuous circle, a circle of vice. Vadim, $100. Thank you, Vadim. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. So now we're only $7 away from our goal. Can you help clarify my confusion about Mallory, the sculptor in the Fountainhead? Was this error in thinking that one can fight ideas with force? Was that what Rand was trying to illustrate? Well, yes. I mean, you know, the idea that force is how you change the world when the world is being driven by bad ideas, and there's no way for you to do that. She's also challenging his malevolent universe premise, the premise that he cannot be successful in this world, that this world is not made for him, that his only resort is violence because the world is, you know, he can never be successful in this world. Right? I mean, there's a real similarity between Mallory and Dominique. But yeah, she was definitely trying to illustrate that you cannot fight ideas with force. But she was also trying to illustrate the dead end, the falsehood of a malevolent universe premise that it leads to force and therefore leads to a dead end, and that what you need is the self-esteem, the courage, and the commitment to fight them, but not fight them physically, fight them ideologically, and fight them with your work. Not give up on your work, do the opposite. Thanks, Vadim. Really appreciate the support. Linda, thanks for the support. That was a sticker. All right. Andrew. It takes self-esteem to admire the admirable. Trump worship is not an example of that, but admiring objectively great qualities in people is the rational psychological response and ought to be a pleasant experience. Thoughts? Yes, absolutely. I mean, too many in our culture lack self-esteem. View people who deserve to be admired with fear, or they view them as a threat. I can never be as great as that, therefore I must resent that. Whereas somebody with self-esteem goes, I can be as great as I can be. If somebody else is greater, or somebody else has done more, achieved greater things, made more money, solved more problems, good for them. That's fantastic. I admire that in them. And to the extent that that can help me get better, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be the best version of me. But you see, a person with self-esteem doesn't envy and it doesn't resent those who achieve more. Quite the contrary. They identify the positive qualities. They celebrate them because they know, A, that it's the same qualities in them that allows them to achieve, and second, to the extent that they can emulate those qualities, but that those qualities in somebody else's success is never a threat to them. It's the opposite. It benefits them in one way or the other. It's a win-win world. In that sense, it's a benevolent world. Somebody else's achievements, if they're real, are benefit to you, not a threat to you. They don't take from you. The world is not zero-sum. Esoteric dichotomy. MAGA is so delusional. Is there even a path back for a generation plus? The MAGAs I know think violence is only on the left, gloss over any right violence. Yeah, I mean, for them, I don't think there is a future. I think they're kind of dead ends. They might get, if Trump is a big failure and falls flat on his face, they might get disillusioned with politics and exit politics for a while. It's hard to tell, but remember, MAGA is still a minority in this country. It's probably 20%. Probably less committed MAGA, probably less than that. Some of them will switch if the culture switches, and some of them will just disappear. But yeah, there's no way back for them. And if they come to dominate, there's no way back for the culture. Andrew, why is right more animated than left by the war on drugs? Well, because the right is always more interested in what you do with yourself. So the left is much more interested in what you do in groups across society. The right is more interested in what you do with yourself. So the right cares about your sex life, and the right cares about whether you take drugs, and the right cares about whether you have kids. The right wants to impose its morality. So Ayn Rand put it this way. The right thinks the material world is meaningless. The only thing that matters is the spiritual world. And the only thing that matters is spiritual life that leads to the afterlife, because this life is useless. The material world doesn't matter. So you can be free in the material world. We don't care. You want freedom? You want to be capitalist in the material world? Go for it. Who cares? But when it comes to what's important, the spiritual stuff, can't do that. You can't enjoy life. You know, part of what they hate about drugs is that makes people feel good. And, you know, they want to be able to run people's lives spiritually. They want to run people's lives. The left is materialist from Marx. They don't care about the spiritual world. You want to believe, you want to do this, you want to all the personal stuff. Who cares? They care about the physical world. They care about the economy. They care about the material stuff. And that's too important to leave to individuals and to markets. That has to be controlled. They want to control that. So each party wants to control what they view as important. The right views your life as an individual is important, and therefore they want to control it. Lucinda, let's reach the super chat goal, everyone. We did. Thank you, Lucinda. You really helped get us there. Lucinda did a €50 let's get to this goal. And yeah, so Lucinda definitely helped us get there. Esoteric Dichotomy. Destiny did condemn the murder on his own stream. Well, that's good. He just won't do it when debating MAGA, who won't condemn January 6th, Pelosi attack, etc. Tired of conceding. Fine. That's a more reasonable position. Vince, regarding tariffs, even though Trump doesn't specifically advocate for it, are tariffs or sanctions effective tools for combating intellectual property theft by companies like Temu and AliExpress? No, they're not. The effective way of handling intellectual property theft is if they stole intellectual property, if Temu stole intellectual property, then the products that are built based on that intellectual property should be banned from sale in the United States. Not taxed. Why should the American people pay because the Chinese pay a tax because the Chinese stole intellectual property from somebody? But if it's a property theft, then a court of a law should declare that these products were a consequence of a theft of intellectual property, and therefore that court of law should ban the sale of those products in the United States. That's how you deal with intellectual property theft. You don't deal with it at the level of government, you deal with it as theft, and you have a remedy. And tariffs are never, ever, ever, ever an excuse for anything. They're not a foreign policy tool. They're not any tool. If you don't want to trade with China, have an embargo. Ban trade with China. But tariffs are a tax on Americans. Why would you tax Americans if you want to penalize China? Now, it's true, China suffers as well. But why penalize Americans and make China suffer? End it. All right, Blaze Guitar Lessons. How do you see the U.S. in 20, 30 years? I don't know. I mean, I can see three scenarios, I guess. But this is a cop-out, right? Three scenarios. Once, America's an authoritarian state. There's basically somebody in Washington who runs the country. We still have elections, but they're nominal. Maybe they're rigged. Maybe we effectively have a one-party system. We look more like Russia looks today, or Russia looked even 10 years ago, where, you know, oligarchs and a president who has a lot of power, a a weak legislature and a Supreme Court just hanging on. But basically, it's authoritarianism, even though it's still under the guise of some kind of constitutional government. Second option is we just somehow peter along here, and the pendulum theory, we get a little bit better and then a little bit worse, and generally it's worse, and we have stagnation and we're not growing, but nothing dramatic happens, right? We're not authoritarian yet. We still have a lot of the appearances of a free country. And then the third is we're at the beginning of a real intellectual revolution where capitalism is on the rise. Lucinda says, my girlfriend is going to study abroad in Florence soon. Any recommendations of places for her to visit there? Oh yeah, I mean, send me an email and I'll send you a list. I mean, it's way too long for me than to do it here. But yeah, I mean, all the museums, all the classic places, all the churches, or the big churches. If your girlfriend loves the arts, I mean, this is heaven here. So churches, museums, yeah, I mean, send me an email and I'll send you a list. All right, final question, I guess. It's a four-parter. Raymond, in China, they have a love-hate relationship with Western goods. They idealize Apple and Nike as a sign of their sophistication and hate it as imperialism and want to domesticate it. The previous Kim sent people to Beijing for McDonald's. The Saudis, Russians, Emirates share this love. What is going on here? How powerful would it be for a boycott the producers to force them to buy Chinese knockoffs and deny them the moral sanction? Deny who the moral sanction? How powerful would it be to boycott the producers, to force them to buy Chinese knockoffs? I don't know who we're talking about. Don't let them pretend they are civilized with iPhones and have them know they are the bad guys. Are they all bad guys? I mean, is the hardworking engineer in Beijing who's saving money up and starting a family and wants to have an iPhone because it's cool and it's the best tool available out there, is he a bad guy? Should he be denied the ability to have an iPhone because his government sucks? I don't know. I'm not sure that's true. If China is a literal military threat to the United States, if we think we're going to go to war with China, then yeah, we can embargo them. But even then, that embargo would probably tip everything towards a war. Is that the best thing we could do right now? And if it's not, then why not let private companies and private individuals decide who to buy from and when to buy, who to sell to and when to sell. If Apple wants to sell to China, let them sell to China. With all the risks associated with that. They might steal your intellectual property, they might do this, they might do that. Apple, know this, and we in the American government are not going to go to war to protect you. Okay, let them sell it. But the hardworking Chinese person is not the bad guy. The government is. And you're not penalizing the government if you embargo a country. You're preventing their people from enjoying the fruits of their labor. So it's not clear to me that that is the right strategy, and that would be ideal. I think, again, the only people who should be embargoed, who you should not trade with, are your explicit enemy, people you expect to go to war with. And I think there are only, I think there are three right now. I think there's Iran, North Korea, and Russia. I don't think China yet qualifies. It's close. And it could qualify pretty quickly. And Apple better be ready for the day when America decides that you should not be able to trade with China. But I don't think we're there. And Apple makes way too much money in China. Blaze guitar lessons. Do you think Milei will win re-election? It's a tough call. I don't know. It really depends what happens in the next 2 years. I mean, he'll win. The election is in 2 years. How will he do in parliamentary election next week? I wish I had somebody from Argentina I could talk to. I don't know. I think he'll do okay, but not great. I think he'll do okay, but not great. And that'll set him back, but it won't completely destroy him. And then the question is, what can he do in the next 2 years, and how will that affect his chances of getting reelected? All right, guys, that is the show for Wednesday, September 17th. As I expect, we will have a show tomorrow. It'll probably be at 4 p.m. Tomorrow, maybe 3:30 or 4 tomorrow. Then we'll have a show on Friday. That one will be earlier, probably 3. And no show Saturday, probably a show Sunday. I'll try to do a show Sunday, and I'm going to try to do a show Monday, and then no shows for the rest of the week. Going to see an opera on Sunday, The Pearl Fishers, Bizet's Pearl Fishers. It's quite beautiful. I've never seen it on stage, and it's not one of those operas I've heard many times, but the little I've heard, it's been really good. And yeah, and we've got one more museum we have to get to. Probably tomorrow we're going to the Museum of the Duomo. That is the main cathedral it's got another Michelangelo, so that'll cover us. We'll have seen all the Michelangelos in Florence. And then I do want to go on Friday, one last time, to go see David. I have to say goodbye to David. So on Friday, I expect to go and see David last time. All right, we got one final question from Andrew. Talk about self-esteem and lack of envy. Francisco was in love with Dagny, but recognized that Galt was superior. Well, I don't know if superior is the right word. It's not the right word. Rand would never use that word. He recognized that you know, that Dagny wanted Galt more, and that Galt was, in some sense, more worthy, and you know, that Dagny's response to Galt was more intense, more significant than her response to him. But I would never call superior. That's not the right word. Yeah, I mean, Rand recognizes in pretty much every one of her novels that you can love more than one person. You can fall in love with more than one person. That you can love people in different ways, in a sense. She also noticed she's the anti-Puritan when it comes to sex. Her female characters have sex with multiple partners in her novels, in all the novels. We the Living, Fountainhead, and Atlas Shrugged. But yeah, you know, love is a personal response. And clearly, Dagny responded more to Galt than to him. And he understood that. And since he loved Galt, he understood what she saw in him. And I think if the reverse had happened, Galt would have understood it too, even though Francisco's not, quote, superior. So the whole superior thing goes out the window because of that. All right. Thanks, guys. They're not superior. They're each amazing. Great. Even if Galt just has something, you know, he has a face that never recognized pain or fear or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, right? When she first sees him in the valley. That Francisco doesn't have, even though Francisco's had this amazing life. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the Super Chatters. Thanks to everybody else. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of